Okay, welcome everybody to our latest workshop session on our virtual safety summit. So again, thank you to everybody for joining. I know some of you, I recognise some of the names have joined some of the earlier sessions. So fair play to you guys. We haven't worn you people out yet, but the day is young. So what we'll do is we're going to crack on and get into this session because I think there's a lot of interest in this. So today's session is about safety as a gain, not as a drain. So changing senior level perception of safety. Really what that means is what we're trying to dig into, I suppose, is, well, firstly, ask you guys out there, do you feel that your senior management, director or board level, really take health and safety seriously? Do they believe that it's more of a positive rather than a drain on an organization? And maybe look at some of the ways that if that perception is there, how can it be changed? And if your experience is on the opposite end of that, where it's actually dealt with as a top priority, how did you get to that position, and maybe give some advice and guidance to other people on how to achieve that. So with us today, we have Pete Jones, and Pete is a digital transformation consultant. Now I'm going to ask Pete to explain a little bit about what that actually means and a little bit about himself and his experience. So Pete, you might just do a quick shout out there to make sure your microphone is working and everybody can hear you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I will start, Billy, by saying I am not a health and safety expert, although I have held board level health and safety responsibilities over the past 10 years. Formerly, I was CTO at Ellis Whittam. Ellis Whittam provide nationwide health and safety support services, ranging from audits and assessments through to acting as competent person. As CTO, we launched a mass market health and safety software product, which is primarily used by businesses ranging between 5 and 100 heads. Although some larger firms who use this software that you may have heard of include Pure Gym, Charles Tyrwhitt, Zipworld. So yeah, we launched software to over 3,000 UK customers. That gave me a real thorough understanding of the UK software, health and safety software marketplace. For the past 2 years, I've been acting as a digital transformation consultant. Back to your question, Billy, what is a digital transformation consultant? I help firms make better decisions around their business support software products, especially health and safety. My help ranges from coaching and advice through supplier selection and consultancy, right down to operational doing stuff, training and launch. So as I say, I'm not a health and safety expert, but I've been working in this area for the last 10 years.
Oh, brilliant. Excellent. So it'd be good to get your insight into this. Now, before we go into the detail of the presentation, we did have another speaker lined up, and that person was is a health and safety manager in their company. And I suppose, as you guys will be well aware, when things need to be managed on the health and safety front, that is the priority. But unfortunately, Matt had to cry off. But I'm sure we'll catch up with him again at some future date to get his insight, which will be really positive. But he has given me authority, if you like, to talk on his behalf about some of the things that we've discussed over the last couple of weeks. So we'll do that. So there's just a couple of other housekeeping things I want to run through very quickly. So we've introduced the topic, and hopefully you guys are all happy with that. And we've had our introduction with Pete. Just on the platform itself, we have our chat. So on the right-hand side, so if you have any issues with the platform logging in or hearing anything at all, just put it in there, and we have a team of guys that will help you out with any issues you may have with the platform. There's also a Q&A piece there as well. So any questions that you have for myself and Pete or on the topic itself, just throw them in there. And also as well, feel free to chat among yourselves. Again, using that chat feature there as well. We might also as well throw some polls in. So if you can just keep an eye on that icon up the top right-hand side where it says polls, we will put a few in there and click into it and give us your insight to some of those polling questions we'll be asking. Now, I'm sure you've seen as you registered onto the page as well that we are not charging for this event, which is typically what we don't do. We don't charge for these events, whether they're on site or virtually. But we are looking to raise money for two very good charities, the NHS Trust in the UK and St James's Hospital, which is based here in Dublin in Ireland. So please dig deep and you'll see that a good few people have already donated, which we really appreciate on behalf of those charities. So without any further ado, let's go into the presentation. I'm sure all you guys know who I am. If not, my name is Billy O'Brien, Director of Customer Success here at Engage EHS and co-founder. My background is environmental health and safety management. I worked as a consultant for a number of years before joining the Engage team and was also involved with the emergency services as a paramedic firefighter for a number of years as well. So quite a varied background. So hopefully I'll have some insight on this topic also as well. Okay, so the first question. So some common senior level perceptions of safety. So this is always potentially a contentious one because from speaking to customers over the years and other organizations, you know, it's this can be very varied from, organization is 100% behind health and safety to, you know, they don't care, you know, there's no funding, you know, which, you know, I suppose that's a really difficult situation to be involved in. So I suppose maybe Pete, I'll just throw this one out to you, you know, over your years of experience, you know, has your experience in this, you know, that senior level support or perception of safety, has it been that varied from, you know, the very low to the, you know, quite high, you know, in terms of priority?
Absolutely. And I think the fact that I formally had board level health and safety responsibilities as a non-health and safety expert gives some indication of the lack of priority that health and safety was often given in the past. Now, when I say in the past, I've definitely noticed a change in especially board level perceptions of the importance of health and safety. That change has definitely happened over the past 5 or 6 years, whether it's driven by compliance, by greater consequences, by the greater need to be seen, to be safe. So yeah, I've definitely noticed a change. What I've found over, you know, certainly in my experiences, firstly, there's disproportionate ownership or responsibilities at the most senior levels for health and safety. It's very rare to find boards or senior managers with more than, or groups of board groups or groups of senior managers with more than one or two owners or responsible for health and safety. So that's the first thing that I'd like to mention. It's commonly somebody else's problem and seen as somebody else's problem rather than a business-wide or an enterprise-wide opportunity.
Yeah, no, I'm inclined to agree on that. Like it's, I think all too often it's like a tick box exercise where, you know, that person is responsible for health and safety. And we see that maybe, you know, throughout, you know, if an organization at top level is not vested 100% in health and safety, so in other words, everybody is responsible. They identify one or two individuals, you know, at top level. So it's the health and safety director, the health and safety manager, that's their area of responsibility. You know, that's who you go to. Whereas, you know, everybody needs to take that ownership. And that's I suppose, a cultural piece. That's a very difficult thing to change, but it can only be driven from top level. They need to be seen to be doing it, for everyone else in the organization to follow that lead, I suppose.
Absolutely, and in my experience as well, in situations where okay is good enough, then change is not cultural. Change is generally driven by firefighting or the urgent need for rapid change, which generally leads to less likelihood of success when you're bringing in new systems or new ways of working. Reactive is never as good as proactive when we're talking about organizational change.
Yeah, that's it, and it is that planning piece. And I suppose, like, if you look at health and safety as any other company function, like, you need to plan, you need to have the resources, you need to know what you're doing. So you have to, and it's interesting. We have a question in from David that's very much part of this topic we're talking about right now, and it's, should that person at board level be qualified? I would say absolutely. Whether they, qualification, again, first thing is, if they have the certificate to say they're qualified, that doesn't mean they're competent. But if that person is taking that responsibility or owning that role at senior management level, at board level, they absolutely have to know what they're talking about. So they need to make it their business to get all the information that they should have. Because when it goes to court, ignorance is not a defense.
I completely agree. It's essential that the board level the board member with health and safety responsibility needs to be able to speak the same language as health and safety experts.
Yeah, and they can build a good team around them, so they can have the qualified, competent health and safety manager stroke director that's feeding information to them as well. So it's about building that knowledge. Most board members, senior management teams are not going to be experts at everything, or even qualified at everything, but they build a good strong team around them, that has the knowledge, has the experience, that can implement that change throughout the organization. And that will filter all the way down then, and engagement from everybody then, will be so much easier because people on the ground will see that senior management are invested in this. Okay, cool. So, we've plenty of chat and conversations coming in there. So, in terms then of maybe some of your previous roles, Pete, with maybe going back 15 years ago or 10 years ago even, that perception of safety as opposed to where it is right now, do you see a big change, or has that been a gradual change over that number of years?
I think it's been a gradual change, but there have been some tipping points over the past few years. For example, if legislation or governance changes, or if the consequences, fines increase, or if the health and safety executive are more likely to find you out, if your clients are more likely to be aware of your health and safety activities, if your brand is at larger risk. So yeah, I'd say the change has been gradual with some steps along the way, those steps driven by external factors, like bigger fines, for example.
That's it, yeah. And I think that's been probably one of the most significant changes in recent years, is that the level of fines that potentially now organizations can be held to. And that's probably opened up a lot of organizations to huge risk, and that's a business risk, like any other business risk, that they have to take account of. One of the things, though, when I'm talking to customers, and sometimes you do get asked, and even prior to Engage EHS as a consultant, I've always tried to steer away from using the stick, to drive change and try and bring people along on that journey, trying to convince them as to why. And that goes for senior management as well as people on the ground. I always found personally that was a better approach. I don't know if you've kind of seen different approaches or how they've worked Pete, over the years, or even out there in our audience as well, what approaches have you guys used to help drive change?
Well, I've seen a few different approaches, and I've seen some really successful implementations of, specifically health and safety management systems, and I've seen, unfortunately, several failed attempts at change as well. What works, and I think I agree, is almost a holistic or a democratic, inclusive approach. A typical health and safety software system, for example, will bring in legal, governance, IT, integration, HR, learning, training. It will bring in, most of the business, operationally as well. Don't forget that those with day-to-day health and safety responsibilities, the sooner we can involve them in any change, the better, because the change affects those people day to day.
Yeah. What about the perception that safety is costly? That it's a drain on business resources. We don't see the return on that investment. What about that perception?
That's a common perception. Any change is expensive, and any change takes time. If we look at the main drivers behind changing our health and safety management systems, the improvements that you would typically want to see, you won't notice for at least 12 months when you can embed the software and monitor change over time. I would counter those by saying, actually, the costs of health and safety systems are relatively inexpensive compared to how much they used to cost, even 5, 6, 7 years ago. And cost of a system can start at nothing, or it can be, a few pounds per employee per month maximum.
Yeah.
In terms of time, it's true that the strategic goals won't be realized or won't really be visible for a little while. But I would counter the time argument by also focusing on the quick wins, the day one wins, which are often forgotten but are really, really important.
Yeah.
These quick wins can be the time taken to record an incident, the time taken to report something happening, and the time taken for that information to make it back to whoever curates that information. A typical example, or rather a flippant example, might be an old-fashioned accident book where you may have to walk and find and search and ask for where is the accident book. If that form is available quickly online, then there's a real quick day one win there, because it's quicker to do things that you have to do. Yeah. So yeah, it's true, the strategic goals won't be seen for some time, but do keep an eye on the day one goals and celebrate the day one successes.
Yeah, it's a good point, because there's some obvious cost savings by having a good safety system in place. And we're not just talking about software, we're just talking about having your entire organization invested in safety. So a system is more than just software. It's the whole cultural piece. But there are huge savings to be made. There's, as you said, some quick wins in terms of time, but also as well just having a full picture and understanding of your safety performance within your organization. Like all too often, it's safety is not a problem. We only have a couple of incidents that happen a year. But what about all those near misses or injuries that go unreported, or incidents that go unreported? Are they being counted? Or not? So there's a perception out there as well that there is no problem when you do below the surface. There probably is an issue that's just bubbling away. Yeah. Okay. So some good insight there. So what we might do is just maybe move on to a couple of other topics that we wanted to cover. today. So the operational, cost efficiencies around this. So we kind of just touched on it there, some time savings and so on. But it's, there are some real opportunities there for organizations, to really drive savings, to see those efficiencies. And I know, from talking to Matt, unfortunately not able to make today, but what he was saying to me over the last couple of weeks is that, their organization is owned by a private equity investment company. So, the value of the organization, on the market is very important to them. And health and safety is right up there. It's right up there in terms of, the business that they're generating, that their safety performance has to be hitting the highest marks every single time. And that helps drive the value of the business. So he's pushing an absolute open door when it comes to that. And that's also then because at that level, they're so invested in safety. That makes his job easier then, and that culture within the organization of everybody being involved in safety, is so important, and that he needs to have that visibility on what's happening throughout the organization. And one of the ways he's doing it is using the software to help run reports, and the board can access all that information and see on a day-to-day basis what's happening in the business, and they can react quite quickly, so they're not waiting for an event to happen. So I think that's one of the key takeaways I had from my conversations with Matt. What about yourself, Pete, just in terms of some of the organizations? Now, again, you have organizations that are very much working in high risk environments, and you have other organizations, potentially low risk, but there is always a risk, but it's low enough risk. What about your experience over the years just dealing with organizations?
Yeah, well, the fundamental for me hopefully works across all organizations, irrespective of their levels of risk. And the fundamental for me is that the better or improved systems encourages better data and information, which in turn influences better decisions. So it's a virtuous circle. As you said earlier, we're not necessarily talking about software systems, but improved systems drives efficiency, because it means that we're reviewing, we're changing, we're measuring, and we're making better decisions off the back of the information that we're gathering, however we're gathering that information. And this I'm trying to think of a few low risk examples. This may be an office environment where prescribed health and safety activities may take X amount of time per week. A review of the system brings efficiencies, improves the way that those responsibilities are carried out, and again, drives operational efficiency through time saving or improved access to better data.
Yeah, and I think also as well, to include in that maybe, the fact that employees will feel valued, because if the organization is taking health and safety serious, they're serious about the health of every single employee that comes into the workplace, including visitors as well. That, you arrive in this morning, we want you to go home safely to your family in the evening. That's your work activity should not be something that prevents you from enjoying life. But yeah, and again, I suppose when we look at that, and one of the things I think comes to mind when we're trying to outline that to the senior management level, and to employees on the ground, health and safety people have to be nearly like salespeople. Like you have to. For me, it's you need to sell the benefits. And you're selling benefits to the forklift operator, or the warehouse manager, and you're selling benefits to the senior directors, but they're all coming from different perspectives. So you need to be able to adapt your message to those individuals, to those people. I suppose, like in terms of how that message is delivered, and that's something that I think most organizations find as a challenge. How do how do you build that business case around identifying those operational efficiencies from a health and safety perspective? What are the metrics that you can use to be able to demonstrate to a board level, here's the money you're going to save, you know, both from time efficiencies doing stuff to people not being out sick, and then deliver a slightly tailored message, but still on the same points to a person driving that forklift. That's the challenge. So any guidance to our health and safety people out there to see how we would go about that? So we might have a few questions coming in, and you know, again, if there is any insight there from anyone out there, you know, in terms of how they've introduced this, you know, a software system or health and safety system into the workplace, just shout out there and let us know. And you know, myself and Pete, you know, we have our own ideas, but it's also good to get feedback and information from others out there as well. I was just thinking, Pete, about the experience Matt had. He actually was telling me that he wrote his thesis for his master's and on the basis of, you know, in around this topic about how safety is the game and getting that senior management level, you know, buy-in. And it was really, you know, firstly, you know, because the senior management team were looking at it from a financial perspective, he needed to drive that from, you know, a performance, safety performance, everybody buying into that journey. So that's worked really well for him. So having everybody involved, making it easy for people to report, making it easy for people to see information and reports that are coming through. I'm sure, like, you know, as a software guy, having access to data, as you mentioned earlier, that's always, you know, quite good as well to, you know, just see that information coming through and how you would parcel that information to make it as clear as possible.
Absolutely, and for me, it's the evolution, you know, from a health and safety sign on the notice board, the evolution from that through to every colleague, every employee having instant access to information, which can help, you know, help them and make their workplace and make their working day safer. So it's faster access to forms, it's faster access to, you know, easily digestible information rather than an A2 poster that nobody reads.
Yeah, exactly. They just looking at a couple of the polls there. So one of the things we threw out at the start of the session was, like, in your opinion, what is the main driver of change with regard to health and safety? It's actually fairly evenly split. So we have 35, just over 35% say that it's client demand for safety standards. So it's people demanding, you know, higher quality. And I suppose there's, you know, people now have a higher expectation than maybe years ago, 20 years ago, that, you know, that whole piece of I'm coming into work and I want to go home safely, you know, and rightly so. And then we have 35%, you know, feel that it was a serious incident that has kind of driven that change, which is unfortunate. And then we have the legislation piece that you mentioned, Pete. That came in just below 30% of the attendees polling. I reckon that was the case. So again, you know, the demand for it was quite high, which is great to see. Also as well, how highly is health and safety valued in your organization? And a good figure here, which is the highest, is quite valued. So the majority of our people on this talk feel that health and safety is highly valued, which is brilliant. And that's, I think that's heartening to see that. And most of them are looking at that either between quite valued to extremely valued or highly valued, which is really, really good. So that's some insight there from the guys who are on this conversation with us. So that is really, really strong. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the dollar value, but maybe just before we go into that. So we didn't really touch on it, but it's no harm to mention the reputation of an organization. So what, like for me, you know, if your health and safety standards are quite low, it's only a matter of time before you have a serious incident. And if you have an incident, you're going to end up having it publicized, you know, apart from, you know, the moral implications and so on. But, you know, that's a huge reputational damage to any organization. And it is something that, you know, whether it's construction sector or whatever, that, you know, one of the questions that's on every pre-qualification questionnaire is, you know, have you had an incident in the last 3 years? You know, so it's something that every organization would like to say no, you know, and have you had any enforcement notices and so on. So that's something that I think, you know, while I mentioned earlier, I don't like to use the stick, but again, sometimes you have to. So you do have to outline this to, you know, your senior management team and the employees as well. You know, their job is reliant on you getting that tender, winning that job. So safety is a key aspect of that. Any comments on that one, Pete, or you're happy enough?
Well, no, I couldn't agree more. But in terms of incidents being publicised, just to mention that publicity can come from the HSE, or it can come from social media, or it can, in terms of the audience of this publicity, it's not just current and prospective clients, it's current and prospective employees and colleagues as well. So reputational damage is more at the forefront because it's more likely to be wider publicized to wider audiences, and the damage will happen faster as well.
Yeah, and like the social media element of it there as well, like it's really important because we're very much you know, driven by social media these days. All you need to do is look across the pond at the US and Twitter being used over there by the president. But yeah, like it's, you know, even looking at the reputational piece, like if you're trying to hire employees, you know, if they see that your safety standards are quite low, you know, you may find it very difficult to get the right employees to work for you as well. Yeah. So that's another key element, you know, that organizations should be conscious of.
Yeah, it's always been important to be safe, but it's increasingly important to be seen to be safe, to be seen by your clients, to be seen by your employees, and to be seen by your prospective clients and employees also.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe looking at one of the other topics that we want to discuss here today was, you know, driving that new revenue. You know, and I suppose we would have touched off it as we had our conversation about, you know, tendering for work and so on. You know, again, and it comes on the back of reputation. You know, that if you have a good reputation in a sector, that if you're looking for work to get more revenue, that chances are, based on that reputation, you'll certainly be in the final stages of winning new business, new work. And I think that's really important for organizations to bear in mind. And even more so these days in COVID year, when it's, you know, everybody is struggling to stay open and keep busy. So it's always something to look at. Any insight on that one, Pete? Just in terms of driving that revenue, that, as you can see there, the dollar sign.
Yeah, not necessarily revenue, but definitely I've seen over the past 3 or 4 years, and I mentioned it earlier, a need to be seen to be safe. And what I mean by that is many businesses change or make changes to the health and safety management systems because they want to win business, and this business increasingly dictates a health and safety accreditation before before you can win or before you can tender for that work. So it might be an ISO certification, or it might be some other health and safety standard which you need to evidence before you can bid and win new work.
Yeah, like it was something that you mentioned, be seen to be safe. You know, that kind of struck me, you know, maybe is that window dressing, you know, just to win the business. And that's, I suppose that's something that I suppose some organizations will do. It is only window dressing, it's ticking a box on a form. But to back that up with accreditations, 45,001 and so on, and having that buy-in from all your employees, I think, and that's, I suppose, the ISO standards, that's what they're trying to work towards, that it is not window dressing, that you have to back it up with actual good standards with your health and safety. Okay, absolutely. Very good. Cool. So we have a few more questions here. And, let me see. So, Natalie, so providing better data is a key driver. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more on that. So one of the things there, so what is your view on helping senior management understand the data and making decisions based on it? That's a tough one as well, in terms of delivering the data and how you deliver that message to senior management. I think all too often over the years I've had feedback from various health and safety people that they're very aware that they don't want to give the senior management too much information, or it needs to be censored, if you like, before it goes to senior management. I don't agree. I think they should have access to all the information. They should be encouraged to dig into the information. But in terms of how you deliver the information to them from a health and safety perspective, I think it should be worth it all. And helping them to understand the data is going to be key. From your leading indicators, like why is there such a big increase in observations being reported, for example? Well, that's a good thing, because they're the leading indicators. That's what we want to capture to prevent that more serious incident happening. So some managers, and thankfully not as many as maybe years ago, are quite happy to see that number of observations elevated quite high. And we have a conversation with a client tomorrow on that very topic. And they went from reporting under 500 observations on a monthly basis to in excess of 26,000 observations being recorded on the system. So it's, that's a huge transformation. And again, driven by senior management who wanted to see that.
I agree there. I think the previous question was around health and safety expertise at senior level, and that role, part of the role is to understand and translate the data. We need to provide all the data. Better data means better decisions. We said that earlier, but we don't need to give people so much data that they can't understand it. So part of the health and safety leadership role is actually to take that data and to translate that into better business decisions, and also communicate those decisions around the organization.
Yeah, exactly. And again, like even following up on that and Natalie's comment about that the data is showing you that at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning is when you have most accidents, maybe with example, bricklayers falling over bricks, as Natalie puts it. Should you stop work every Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock, and that means you're not going to have any accidents. And nice sarcastic tone there as well. But that's the thing. It's understanding the information. There's always a good story from a retail customer of ours that across their network of locations that had particular incident that was involving customers, and it was customers slipping close to an area where perfume samples were being tested, and it was something that when they dug deeper into it, it was the cleaning fluid that they were using to clean the area was causing the surface to be more slippy. So again, sometimes it may not be the obvious thing. That you need to look at, other other areas, I suppose, as part of your investigation, and really understand the data. So yeah, so it's been quite a journey on this. I suppose this topic is quite broad. Everyone's experience is very different in terms of the organizations. The one good thing, I think, from the polls that we've seen and the interaction from people on this talk has been that the vast majority of people are in organizations that their senior management team are taking it serious, which is really good and really positive to hear. So any closing statements from yourself, Pete, or do we have anything from anyone in the audience there as well?
There's another question, if you'd like me to go ahead and answer the other question, Billy.
Yeah.
So the question from David: at director level, what function, i.e. HR, IT, operations, normally gives the most kickback, and why? And I can answer this in two ways, actually. At the start of the project, or at the start of any change, we have to remember competing priorities. And competing priorities at board level might mean that health and safety projects are deprioritized or moved down the list.
Yeah.
We counter that by taking a holistic approach, by involving all areas of the business appropriately as early as possible. Further down the line, when we're into the operational change phase of the project, feedback is not uncommon from those who are most affected day to day by any changes that we're trying to implement. This might be health and safety managers or those with day-to-day health and safety responsibilities who have to change the way that they do their role. And again, we can counter this. We counter this by, I find it's really useful to be as democratic and inclusive as possible. So include a section of your operational team as early as possible, include them in the change process, include them in communications, include them in the supplier selection process, give people a say, and we find champions early, and we find supporters of change as early as possible to help with the the kickback from those most affected day to day.
Okay, very good. And actually that prompts me there as well, that and you're right, like in terms of competing with other business functions that are looking to implement projects, that's something that health and safety people absolutely have to be aware of and should be communicating with those other departments. So it should be a holistic approach. What about one of the things that we hear over and over again in the last year and a half or so is GDPR, and how GDPR can potentially impact on a project getting started, in terms of an organization looking at implementing a system. But there's a lot of challenges, and I think a lot of misconceptions out there around the GDPR guidelines.
Yeah, I think we've said it a few times today. Take a holistic approach and involve and include those with GDPR or data security responsibilities at the earliest opportunity. Include the HR team in the project, include the legal or governance team in the project, include the IT team in the project at the earliest opportunity, because GDPR, data security, that might be a hurdle that those in the health and safety team are unable to cross without help from others in their organization. So the sooner the better in terms of involvement in the project.
Yeah. So if you're thinking of starting a new project, it's get those key stakeholders in the business involved as quickly as possible. And I think that's one.
Day one, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of health and safety people, may not have experienced in implementing a project, a software project particularly. It could be their first time, and they need guidance and support around that. So it's not just about trying to convince the senior management team, but it's also understanding what is the internal processes around, making the case initially for a project like this, but also as well, how you implement a project. Sorry about that. was somebody ringing to give me some advice. Okay. Okay, well, I think, in terms of where we're at with this, they're very persistent on this. Okay, apologies there for that. So just to crack on this, is there anything else that we need to cover on this, Pete?
No, I think we've been through the four main points. I think if I can recap the things that we've mentioned a few times, really, how do we change perceptions? Well, we start by taking a holistic approach and include and involve all appropriate areas of the business as early as possible in any change. And the last thing I wanted to mention as well is don't forget that it's any health and safety system change doesn't just affect those with day-to-day health and safety responsibilities or health and safety in their job title. We need to involve legal, HR, governance, IT, learning, training, development. So yeah, it does touch everybody in the business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's a very good point. And I think, that's for every organization, no matter how big or small you are. I think we need to take that holistic approach. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, I think in terms of the topics we've covered, hopefully we've just, I suppose, like, we're not trying to give a solution to everybody. What we're trying to do with these talks is just prompt the conversation, hopefully give some tips based on experience, that's what yourself, Pete, and we would have gone through with various organizations. Want to thank everybody for participating in this. As I say, Matt sends his apologies. It would have been great to get his insights, from working with his organization, but we will catch up with him again. Pete, I really want to thank you. Understanding, with your experience and background, you've been working a long many years, not unlike myself in this area. The only reason you do it, you're passionate about it, which is great, and that really comes across. So I want to thank you again for that. So just before we wrap up, recordings of this sessions, of all our sessions, are available straight after each session, but we'll also be emailing out the recordings in the coming days as well. So keep an eye out for those. Our CS team and product and sales team are available in the exhibition booths as well there. So if you want to book a meeting with somebody, feel free to do so. And also, as well, I mentioned at the start, we are raising money for those two charities, the NHS Trust and St. James's Hospital. So please dig deep and let us support those charities. They're really good cause, doing great work and under a lot of pressure in these COVID times. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody. And again, thanks a lot, Pete.
Thank you. You're welcome.